placing of stock harvested tobacco into an air-cure barn or housing has been the most laborious and timely of all production practices. Agricultural engineers at the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture and many private inventors have studied and tested numerous ideas and methods to reduce crew size, work hours, and make this task more efficient. The continual search by agricultural engineers for a workable and affordable housing method has led to a unique cable-hoist housing system. It permits one worker to place tobacco into a barn at the rate of 2 to 3 acres per day, and it's done at ground level without assistance and with 40 to 60% reduction in labor hours. The cable-hoist housing system involves 4 components. Special wooden beams that hold the equivalent of 2 rails of tobacco. Modifications to the conventional barn that include removing the tier rails and permanently suspending 2 small cables from the rafter framework for each 2 rails of width. 2-wheel trailer carriers for the beams. And a hydraulic-powered hoist that lifts and positions the beams of tobacco into the barn. In operation, empty beams are placed onto the trailer carriers either manually or with the use of a tractor forklift. The empty beams can be placed onto the trailers at the barn or in the field from a supply of beams stacked on a farm wagon. Walkboards extending from a wagon bed make lifting and placing beams from a wagon much easier. Generally, 3 or more trailers are hooked together for a more efficient field filling, transport, and housing process. The field filling can be done several different ways, depending on the number of workers and the speed desired. Pulling beside the stick row with 2 workers is the basic method. 1 worker stays on the far side of the trailer and fills the beam from that side. The second worker fills the near side and hands every other stick through to the first worker. The trailer should be filled from the rear end towards the front end for better driver visibility when pulling up. The far side worker should do the tractor pull-up as required. A third person, if available, could do the tractor driving to speed up the loading process. When placing the sticks onto the beam, insert the stick about 4 to 6 inches through the beam slot and several inches away from the last stick. Then shake and spread the plants evenly on the stick with the outer plant about 4 inches from the end of the stick. Finally, move the stick to about a 6-inch spacing from the last stick, or as desired, for proper curing spacing. The field filling takes 2 or 3 workers about 6 to 8 minutes to fill each 14-foot beam with 40 to 45 sticks of wilted tobacco. 3 trailers can be loaded in 18 to 24 minutes for a rate of 10 to 13 worker hours per acre. 2 sets of 3 or 4 trailers are recommended so that one set can be filled while another is being unloaded to achieve a housing capacity of approximately 1 acre per day for 2 or 3 workers, or 2 1/2 acres per day for 4 or 5 workers. An extra driver is needed for transport when 3 to 4 workers are field loading. The loaded trailers transport very well, with an occasional stick breakage due to usual rough travel. The trailers track very well to enable passage through gates or around corners. In the barn, the trailers are pulled under the position where the beams will be hoisted, with the front trailers centered under the barn cross supports. The hoist power unit is positioned in the adjacent driveway, with the hoses facing the trailer position. The left side hoist is hooked to the left position cable, and the right side likewise, so the control buttons will be in a natural logic for operation of the right and left hoists by the right and left buttons. Each hoist is hooked to the proper cable by slipping the cable loop over the pin on the drum of the hoist. When hydraulic pressure is applied by the handheld switch control, the hoist drum rotates and literally winds itself up the cable. Each cable is slipped into a saw slit in the end of the beam, so the hoist can securely fit under the beam and lock behind the steel cleats for lifting. When both hoists are in position, the tobacco is ready for liftoff. The handheld switch control and length of wire enable the operator to walk around, observe, and maneuver the hoists upward or downward to allow passage between the barn supports, braces, and other obstructions. One end of the beam is raised higher than the other to permit this movement. The smooth, sloped ends of the beam help the beam slide past the barn members. Once the beam is at the desired tier level and above both cross members, the beam is leveled and lowered into support blocks for stability and safety through the curing period. Proper spacing of the cables on the pipes enables the beam to center on the supports with only occasional tugging on the hoses by the operator to ensure proper position on the blocks. The ends of the metal cleats rest on the supports to hold the beam weight and set behind a plywood scab or similar metal edge to prevent slipping off the supports. This safety feature is a very important part of the cable hoist housing system and should not be neglected in any construction. The conversion of some older barns may require changing of the cross support spacing to a 5-foot vertical spacing, or the use of extra boards and shim spacers to bring the block supports to a standard dimension for the uniform beam lengths to fit anywhere in the barn. If one end bent of a barn is several inches different in length than the other bents, special length beams may have to be made. Paint the end of these beams with a color to indicate they belong in a special part of the barn. After secure positioning of the beam into the support, the hoists are lowered to near ground level to engage and lift another filled beam. This round-trip process can be done in about 2 minutes for a lower tier and up to 5 minutes for a 4th tier up. A 5th fixed tier of height is not recommended because of the extreme barn height and poor operator visibility and control, especially in dimly lit barns. The next trailer is then pulled into position and another beam is lifted. This process is repeated until 3 or 4 fixed tiers are filled. When fixed tiers of one barn position are filled, the hoists are unhooked from the cables and moved to another position for hookup and lifting. The portability and ease of moving the power unit simplifies this process. When all fixed tiers of a driveway are filled, an extra swing tier can be hoisted into position if there is enough clearance between the ground and lower tier. This swing tier is suspended from the lower cross support with extra cable loops. Hence, the support has to be braced and strong enough to support a double load. This procedure enables an extra 20 to 30% capacity of tobacco in a barn that has the clearance needed under the fixed bottom tier. The trailers need to have fold-down or partially removable uprights to enable the trailers to be pulled out from under the low-hanging tobacco without the uprights damaging leaves or stalks. The maximum one worker in a barn can hoist is about 3 acres per 10-hour day if the loaded trailers are brought steadily into the barn door and empties are taken away by a driver. 3 sets of trailers, 2 tractor drivers, and 3 good field workers would be needed to achieve this high capacity. The spaces around and between the beams provide good ventilation and air movement during the curing process and help compensate for a slightly closer spacing of the sticks than normally used on tier rails. Good sidewall ventilation panels are still highly recommended for curing. Taking down the tobacco at stripping time is a reverse process. The hoists are guided by the hoses up under the beam and secured behind the metal cleats. The beam is lifted to an angle and lowered between the barn cross supports, tugging on the hoses if necessary to swing the beam end past any barn support. The beams can be emptied of tobacco at ground level or directly onto a wagon and bulked for transport to the stripping area. Empty beams are stacked out of the way for a temporary time and later stacked and/or stored in a manner to prevent deterioration during the off-season. The hydraulic hoist is powered by an 8 to 10 horsepower gasoline engine and is now available from fabricators building the hoist according to university specifications and a patent license from the University of Kentucky Research Foundation. Powering the hoist from a tractor has not proven to be as workable as the self-contained unit and is more complicated to match the varying tractor hydraulic systems to the special needs of the hoist controls and motor. Also, early trials by producers found that the tractors were very inconvenient to use in the limited space of barns, and just not worth the economic savings of the extra gasoline engine and a few hydraulic components that could be saved. The proper 12-volt DC controls and hydraulic components are still needed and must be matched for proper and safe operation. The use of electric motors in various schemes also has not been found to be capable of compact, safe, and durable performance necessary for the system to work properly for a long time. For these reasons, a self-contained power unit of the specified design is recommended. This special portable hydraulic hoist system can be used in several barns or shared by several producers for many acres of capacity over many years to make the per acre cost rather small. No other method or system has been found to beat the cable hoist system for labor-saving housing in new or modified conventional barns.
Well, we needed a barn, and we looked at some cable hoist barns around. We thought that was the way to go. And I considered it as being one of the four major things that happened to tobacco in my 40-some years, and that was the tobacco setter, MH30, baling tobacco, and the cable hoist barn. It's the four greatest things I've seen happen to it.
The labor is the main reason we were looking at this cable hoist system. Labor is hard to come by in our neighborhood, and the labor that I do get is mainly fellows that will help house tobacco so they can have a place to deer hunt. So they're not real energetic, and they're not really used to climbing up in the barn. And with the cable hoist, they don't have to climb in the barn, and they can hang tobacco on the wagon in the field and tell jokes and have a good time while they're doing it. And also it's safer because you don't have somebody up in the barn that might fall out because he's not used to doing that type of work.
I think this is something that really will adapt itself to stick cutting, and we're going to stick cut tobacco for many, many years. And from the other types of system to handle tobacco, I felt like they were economically prohibitive, being able to go that route because it was so costly. I think this is something a person can consider and can really pay itself back and reap benefits from in a short period of time.